Welcome to our HQ Live. We're so excited. We have Barb Tatera here with us today, and she is one of our national educators from Arizona. Barb, can you just tell us a little bit how you got involved in quilting?
Well, when I started quilting, I was actually living in Poland, and
wow!
Yeah, my husband's job took us to Europe, and so my youngest had just started school, and so I had a little bit of time on my hands because without a work permit, so I joined a quilting group there, and so it was really just doing something to pass the time, and now it's got taken over my life because it's been so much fun, and I've just really enjoyed.
What a fun story.
Yeah.
So. One thing I have found as an educator traveling around the world is quilters are amazing everywhere.
Yes.
So I bet you have some fond memories of quilters in Poland.
Yeah,
so.
I do.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Well, what we decided to talk about today is quilting negative space. Barb is like an expert on quilting negative space. We love her quilts and what she chooses to do with negative space. But I think maybe first off, we ought to kind of define negative space. So how would you define negative space?
Well, in traditional quilts, I think of negative space as what people usually call the background fabric.
Okay.
And even sashings and borders, I think, can kind of be negative space as well. But in the modern quilts, negative space has taken on a whole new meaning. And so, especially with minimalist designs, the quilt can be almost all negative space. And so that's, at first was a little intimidating, but now it's just fun. You know.
So as a long arm quilter, we get pretty excited about that negative space these days,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
It's like a new playground. It's so much fun
to
be able to put some of our quilting designs and techniques in that space.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. So tell us what some of the things that you consider or you think about when you're kind of designing the quilt. What are some things that you have to consider?
Well, before I even start the quilt, I think about my pattern choice because I'm actually looking for patterns that have a lot of negative space because I enjoy doing the negative space, and I enjoy trying to create something different in that negative space. So I might choose a pattern that doesn't have a lot of intricate piecing because I want to emphasize the negative space. So I think about my pattern first.
Okay.
I also think about my fabric choices. I don't want to have a lot of busy fabrics if I'm going to do a lot of quilting in that area.
Okay, so are you telling me that since you've become a long arm quilter, it's kind of changed how you even start the quilting process, because now you're looking for fabrics and patterns that can give you space to show some quilting?
Absolutely, because if I'm going to put all that work into my quilting, I want it to at least show. So I do. I think about, like, I like to use those busy fabrics if I'm going to do a block or whatever. But my backgrounds and those kind of things, I'm using a solid tone on tone, or something that reads as a solid in the background. Yeah.
Well, definitely when we're thinking about how to quilt a quilt, those fabrics, like patterned fabrics, really busy fabrics, which we still love, but we just think about quilting them differently. So as a quilter, we pick out our fabrics according to maybe how we want to quilt it. So
exactly.
Yeah, it's changed my world as well. Okay, other considerations.
Also the batting, that's a big consideration for me. Is I like to use a wool batting, so I use wool a lot. Sometimes I use two battings, and I'll put like a cotton 80-20 below the wool, and then the wool on top.
Okay.
The other batting that's fairly new to the market is Hobbs has a 80-20 that's actually cotton and wool together, and so it gives you just a little bit more loft. So I want to. I'm choosing a batting where I'm going to get some loft.
Okay. I'm sure people are asking that. Why would you choose two battings?
Yes.
And tell them why you would
Well,
layer those 2 battings.
I layer the battings because whatever you don't quilt is really what shows off, and so using the 2 battings almost gives you like a faux trapunto look.
Yeah,
you know,
it does.
It really accentuates what's not quilted there.
Yeah.
And then the other consideration is my thread choice.
Okay.
I'm usually, if I'm doing intricate quilting, I'm usually picking a thread that's on the thinner side, like a 50 weight, or even up to the 100 weight micro quilter. And I generally try to match my thread in the negative space to the background of it, so that
Right.
just my texture's showing, not necessarily my thread is showing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that idea as well.
Yeah.
So that's what I choose, is a finer thread when I want kind of a lot of thread, and I
Right.
don't want the thread to take over. I want the texture. so.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about ways. How do you design it, or are there tools that you use in helping you to design?
Yeah, absolutely. Because especially in modern quilts, which I do a lot of modern quilts, there's a big area, so I need to break that up somehow. And so one of the things that I do is I use page protectors. So I have, you might even just slide out.
Okay.
So this is just a little wall hanging, which actually we'll see this later.
Okay. So you took a picture of it.
I took a picture of it and printed it.
Okay.
And then I put it into a page protector, and I just started drawing some ideas on what I could do with this quilt. And I'm not really worried about them being so much to scale or neat. Obviously not neat. You can
I
see.
think you're neat.
But I'm just getting my ideas down on that kind of thing, and just to see kind of what I like. And so now, if I want to get an idea of what it's going to look like in the actual space, then I would use Handi Quilter's preview paper.
Preview paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that preview paper, I can lay it right on my quilt. And so, for example, here, like if I have this wonky diamond area here, I can decide if my design is going to fit in there, and if it's got enough quilting. You know, if I have a motif, and once I get it this big, I might decide, oh, that's not enough quilting for that area, you know, for what I was thinking. So this is a really handy tool to get something to be more the size that you're expecting it.
And I find when I'm free motion quilting, it's really helpful to draw the design the size I want to quilt it.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's nice to practice small, but to be able to actually draw it the size that it's going to be quilted is helpful when I go to the machine.
And drawing it also gives you your thread path.
Yes, it does.
Know, so that's another good bonus of using the preview paper. Another tool that's really useful is using our new program, Pro Stitcher Designer. Now on this one, I took a picture of my quilt, and I tried to get it on my design wall as flat as possible.
Okay.
And then I can load that picture into Pro Stitcher Designer using the backdrop tool.
So I'm going to just say a little bit about the backdrop tool in Designer. It's really a neat function.
Absolutely.
When you're in Pro Stitcher Designer, you can go to backdrops and download. So you can just browse all the pictures that are on your. If you're a quilt picture taker like I am, it's kind of nice to be able to download those and be able to just play with it right there. So it's as simple as just a couple of buttons to upload it into the Designer program.
Absolutely. And so when you can see with this, I did not lay out my entire quilt. All I wanted to do was get my ideas, because I wanted to divide up my quilt. And this, I have to say, this quilt stayed on my design wall for a long time because I couldn't figure out how to quilt it, because it had a big negative space in the middle, which was easy to figure out, but it also had these kind of funky shapes in between the blocks. And so once I figured out in Designer that I could draw some lines to break up those the negative space on this quilt, then it all sort of came together. But I didn't really feel like I needed to lay out the whole quilt, because I was only going to use Pro Stitcher in a few select places, and then I was going to free motion all the rest of it.
But it allowed you to see how that secondary design added to your whole quilt.
Absolutely.
I love that.
Yeah.
It really gives you
absolutely.
a whole picture of what it can look like when it's done. Even though you're only quilting some of it with the Pro Stitcher, it gives you the whole
Yes.
the whole picture. So.
And actually, that's kind of my favorite go-to method. If I'm going to use my Pro Stitcher, I like to not do the entire quilt, you know, because it gives you that little bit of free motion and Pro Stitcher together to me, which is like the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm with you on that. I like to do both, so
Yeah.
it's fun. Okay, let's move this out of the way. And
Okay.
let's look at some of your quilts.
Okay. This quilt was a vintage quilt that was actually given to me by Handi Quilter, and I hadn't really done much of a vintage quilts before, so this was a super big challenge to me because it was super wonky, and
We find that with almost all vintage quilt tops, right?
Yes, and I had to figure out how to quilt it, and I did do some Pro Stitcher designs on it. So I made the little fans that kind of echo the fans in the piecing.
Love how that adds to the
yeah,
piecing
and
or
then
the applique.
and then I put a little kind of a on-point design in the diamonds to kind of do that, and then I had to do all of this micro stippling just to try to shrink in all of this extra fabric that was sort of in this quilt. So it was a bit of a challenge. You can kind of see it's still not exactly straight and everything, but my goal on this one was to quilt it in a way that would surprise the original maker of the quilt, and I feel like I probably did that.
I am 100% sure that the original maker would be thrilled seeing this quilt finished and quilted. It takes two artists sometimes to finish a project, and I'm sure they would be very happy. We were talking about it earlier, and we have a fun feature on our machines that kind of keep track of how many stitches. So just tell us how many stitches went into this quilt, Barb.
There is over 250,000 stitches in this one
amazing?
quilt. It's pretty heavy, actually, when you pick that up.
A lot of little tiny stippling.
It does have a lot of little tiny stippling.
And out in the border where you did this matchstick quilting, that's a lot of stitches in itself.
Yeah.
So I really love what you did with this quilt.
Thank
it's
you.
beautiful.
Thank you.
Let's see another one.
Okay.
I'm going to just fold this up and
Okay.
put it over to the side. Okay.
All right. Well, this is the one that you previously saw the picture of.
On Designer.
On Designer, right? And so this was one where I did a Pro Stitcher design in the middle. And then I divided up, and then this is a Pro Stitcher design actually in the center of these 4 blocks as well.
Okay.
And everything else is free motion quilting on this. So I just divided this. You can kind of see here, this was such a funky area, you know, and I was like trying to think of what would really fit in there. And so once I divided it up, I was really pleased with the overall look. And I didn't do anything complicated. Everybody can do a swirl and do the back and forth lines. So it really was pretty simple once I figured out how to divide it up.
I love how the secondary design that you added with your quilting adds to the beauty of the whole quilt. I mean, that on-point square that you added is just, it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it looks really good.
Yeah, I liked how this one came out. So that's an example of how to use your negative space in traditional.
And I liked how we were talking about it, when you divide it up, it makes it a lot easier to conquer. So it was easier to decide to do matchstick here in this smaller space, and the swirls here once you divided that negative space up a little bit.
Absolutely. And then the other example of a traditional quilt is the one we have behind us, which is the single Irish chain. And on that one, I did something kind of similar because I put the diamond medallion sort of thing, in the middle. But when you look at that quilt, you kind of almost lose the effect of the single Irish chain, which I really...
Because your eye goes to your quilting as equally as it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really liked how that one came out, using that negative space in a different way on a traditional quilt.
I'm not sure I would have thought to do that, and I just really love the effect.
Yeah.
I'm going to think to do it now. That's beautiful. I love it.
Okay.
Okay. I hate to fold these up and put them away. I just want to keep looking at all of your quilting.
Okay, so another thing that I like to do is use the quilting to emphasize an area. So this is just a little sample. This is just one of the feather designs that's right in the pro stitcher.
Feather in a square.
Yep, right,
pro stitcher.
right in the pro stitcher. So the negative space behind there, I didn't do anything with, and it looks great. It's fine.
It's a great design.
You can also then see it with filling in the negative space in the back.
Yeah.
And so this one, I put in some pebbles and a few little matchbooks in the middle, and you can see that that design just pops.
Really makes the design pop,
exactly.
having that background fill.
It does.
That's a great
yeah.
example of how a little more quilting can just make a little icing on the cake.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
So this is another one, an example of how we use the quilting to emphasize a particular area on your quilt. So if you have a quilt and you love that one block, you know, it has your favorite fabric in it.
There's something you really want to stand out.
Exactly, something you really want to stand out, then you can quilt that negative space so that that stands out. So in this quilt, this letter here is a Sanskrit letter for Om, because I like to do yoga, and so in yoga that's sort of meaning inner peace, which is what the name of the quilt is, which is inner peace. And the idea of this quilt is the star is emphasizing this letter, and there is complete quilting chaos around this letter, so that the idea is you can still have some inner peace even if you have chaos all around you.
Can I say it's beautiful chaos? It's a beautiful chaos around this inner peace. But I love the idea behind the quilt, and that you were able to just really feature something important to you with your quilting.
Now in this quilt, this one I wanted to create some movement in this quilt, and so the idea behind the negative space, I started with some kind of flying geese kind of up in that upper corner, and so I'm sort of drawing the eye of the viewer
for sure
across my quilt from left to right, and so that quilting, and you'll notice what stands out is what's not quilted on this quilt. You know, so I've thrown in, you know, some of the mandala designs on here that you can kind of see, because those are what stands out, because it's not the quilted part. So if you want to draw your viewer's eye, you can arrange your motifs to kind of draw their eye.
Give movement in the quilt.
To give movement.
I love that.
Yes. And this is one of my very favorite quilts. I love the Tula Pink fabric, so I've, you know, fussy cut some of her cute little critters in this one. And so my idea on this one was to use the negative space to create some phantom blocks, and to give it a 3D kind of look. And so since my applique was in circles, I of course did some phantom circles and then put different fills in each of the circles. But I also did some overlapping, so that like this circle is hiding behind that cute little
raccoon.
The cute little raccoon there, and you know, I've got circles here behind, even with the phantom ones, that I've got this circles kind of behind that. So when you see this one at a distance, you really can see sort of the 3D look that you get when
you really have some depth with those circles being behind each other. The other thing I want to point out on this one is the different fills. You added different fills in every one of the circles, and the way they accentuate each other, because when you have some lines or wavy lines next to the swirl or curl, it really just is so pleasing to the eye.
Yeah.
Just really.
And the circles then, of course, because you have to have that echo, because that gives your eye somewhere to rest.
Yeah.
And if you didn't have the echo, it would just sort of all blend in together, and
you'd kind of lose the circle if you didn't have that echo there. So it's really important when you're doing something like this to have a resting place.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
beautiful.
Well, thank
so
you.
Fun.
Thank you. Okay, so this is back to, if
Okay,
you
let's go
remember,
back to these
yes,
page protectors.
This was the quilts that I did, and I ended up actually doing a completely different design.
So we
that
had
was,
two amazing ideas, and you went
and
to a
I
third.
actually did a third because I was looking at the squares, and I just thought, oh, let me do these squares and do some faux squares. So what I did with this one, so this was squares, so you can kind of see how I ended up quilting this. And once again, you can see I get kind of stuck because I love my swirls and I love my back and forth lines.
They just work so well together.
They just work, exactly.
It's not a problem. You keep
I'm
doing
allowed,
that.
yeah.
You keep doing that.
Well, you know, like I like to tell quilters in class, all you need to do is pick 2 or 3 designs.
Really, you do.
And get really, really comfortable with those designs, and you can fill any kind of backgrounds that you like.
That's right.
Yeah. So, so this was sort of my modern version of this quilt with the squares, and then I also did a more traditional version, just to show you how, like on this one, I paid more attention to filling in the squares.
The squares
right?
that were there.
So
Yeah,
I filled in this
the piece squares.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I filled in this square. I filled in this square. I filled in this square, and it's a little hard to tell, but this is actually 2 different yellows.
Okay.
I don't know if you can kind of tell that, but so I kind of treated each thing a little bit differently. You know, I did the arches in this one and did the feathers, which kind of overlapped both of the border ones. But you can see that the squares are much more pronounced on this one, and then this one, I didn't pay attention. I did my quilting and sort of ignored
Added a secondary design.
where the squares were on this one. And so it's like, to me, this was the fun part because they're both about negative space on the quilt, but one is more modern and one is more traditional, and a completely different look.
And completely different than where she started.
Yes.
So all this drawing really got her brain moving, didn't
It did, it did.
It's a good lesson on how to become better at creative ideas, and it's just by practicing them, by drawing them, and this is really hard when you first start, is trying to put your thoughts or ideas onto to paper or plastic, and look what you came up with.
Well, and also I like doing the page protectors because I use the dry erase markers, and so all you need to, if you don't like that idea, you just wipe it off. You know,
just get rid of it.
You get rid of it, so there is no evidence of what you didn't like. You know, it's not there. So you know, you don't have to be nervous like I have to have this beautiful design my first try. Because you just wipe it off and then you try again until you find something that you do like.
That's certainly good advice, is to just get drawing. So, okay, so I love the quilts you brought.
Oh,
but
thank
I
you.
was noticing as we were going through them also, like your bindings. So I'm going to bring a few quilts back on here and talk to me about your bindings. Both of these, it looks like you chose kind of the same border fabric to bind in.
I did.
Same with this one.
Right.
Now this one is a completely different binding. What did you do on this one?
Okay, this is not a binding, it's a facing.
Okay.
And so
can I flip this edge
sure.
over?
And so what you do with this one is this is kind of a wider piece, and I sew it on you know, kind of like what you would do to a binding, and then I do a stay stitch. And the stay stitch kind of helps you to fold that back, because when there's that much intricate quilting along the edge, doing a facing is sometimes a little difficult to get it to fold back.
Fold over
to
nicely.
Fold over nicely. And so doing that stay stitch seems to help with that. And then you just sew it down like you do your normal binding, but yet you've got this edge that just sort of goes off into infinity.
So it kind of allows your designer, your eye, to kind of finish like over there in the corner. Your flying geese is kind of cut off, but with a binding, it kind of frames it and finishes it and stops. There's a stop.
Yes.
But with your facing it, it just allows your eye to just kind of finish seeing that flying geese, or
Exactly.
to picture it keep going.
Exactly.
So I really like facings.
Yeah,
on
I do
certain
too.
quilts.
Especially for wall quilts that you're going to be hanging up. You know,
Yeah.
I tend to use the facings more for wall quilts, and then like a quilt I'm going to use, I'll almost always use the binding. You know,
Yeah.
but
I want to show this one too. It's a really unique binding. I love what you did on this binding because
yeah.
she put whites
White.
all around the white,
Mhm.
and then a colored
a
binding
colored, yeah. So I
around
just
the colored section.
exactly. So I just kind of had to measure and try to figure out how long I needed for all the this to be.
I love these new ideas.
and
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun. But because when I was doing this, when I did this, this was part of the chaos over here. When I went to decide how to do the binding on it, I was like, if I didn't want a colored one because I felt like that would really stop your eye there, and if I put the white over here, that just didn't seem to go either. So this was the only way that I could figure out to really do this one.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I hope you have learned or been inspired as much as I have been today. I am so glad that you came and shared this with us.
Oh, well,
So
I enjoy doing the negative space so much, so I'm appreciative to be here.
I love your kind of quilting, and that's what I aspire to do. So, but thank you for watching us. I'm glad that Barb was here, and I just want to remind you to leave a comment or please subscribe to our YouTube channel and have some fun quilting.